Okay, what they says? We've had a lot of time to think back on the good times we've had with Dad. As is the course with illnesses and death, we reminisce and wax nostalgic, which I think we've done a pretty good job of. I grew up in a very different family than my brothers and sisters. I basically grew up an only child. Debbie was out of the house married. Ralph was in the Navy. Jimmy was working, and it was just me and them. So I have a lot of one-on-one time with both of them. And I have many special memories, especially with him. Like sitting in his recliner with him, watching the news, Wide World and Disney, Little House on the Prairie. He preferred the news. The rest of the time he was resting his eyes. I remember him walking out the door and down the road to meet his car full for work with Uncle Joe Gallo. And as I watched him, I cried the entire time going down that hill on Orchard Road. And I remember him building my playhouse in the backyard and both of our decks on our house. And going with him to the lumber yard to pick up the wood. And the smell of fresh lumber will forever remind me of him. I remember him ordering me to scratch his back. As my brothers and sisters can attest, this was a feat of utmost skill, much like an obstacle course. Dad's back was covered in moles, and learning to navigate amongst them was quite challenging, and hitting one was not good for him or us. I remember Daddy and our old boxer dog, Max, which some of you probably had the pleasure of knowing. Daddy loved that dog, and I'm sure he's sitting up against Daddy's legs right now. I remember the day I brought my boyfriend, now husband, home to ask permission from my parents to marry me. And though it was just a formality because I did what I wanted anyway, I tried to be traditional for Daddy's sake. So when Bill asked for my hand, Daddy stood up, looked at him, stuck his hand out, and said, "You're one crazy son of a bitch." His marital advice to my soon-to-be husband consisted of, if she gets on your nerves, you tell her to go scratch her ass. That was nearly 17 years ago, and there isn't a time that Bill says that to me where we both don't think of Dad and Bill doesn't feel completely justified in telling me to do so. I remember Dad's proud face the day I graduated from high school, and again when I graduated college, and when he came to visit my newborn daughter in the hospital. Poppy is very special to my little girl, and she'll have some great memories with him too. I don't think she'll ever, or any of his grandkids, will ever see a golf cart and not think of going to the pool, or going to get the mail, or going to see alligators for their Poppy. Poppy sent my daughter her first roses when she was 6 years old because he wanted to be the first man that ever sent her flowers. In their later years, after Dad and Mom came to Pembroke, there were new memories to be had for them, for all of us and our new family, all of you. There were his, I'll keep it in OPON, Pal golf games and his breakfasts, and there were the daily trips to the villages, the fresh market, and Ollie's, and let's not forget Angelo's. And we embraced their new Pembroke pals and their new lives here in Florida, and we as a family mourned with them when they lost good friends here. I asked Daddy once what he wanted people to remember about him. And he said he wanted to be remembered as a good husband, a good father, and a good provider. When Mommy was diagnosed with cancer, Daddy took on the brunt of her care himself. For roughly 2/3 of her disease, in which she was paralyzed and unable to walk or move much for that matter, Daddy made sure she wanted for nothing. The hospice staffers have told us that they were amazed at the level of care that he provided for her. And Daddy was no spring chicken himself. He had a bad back. He was getting on in years. But Mommy, in return, didn't let a day go without letting him know how much she loved him. And Mommy was not an outwardly affectionate lady, as most of us kids can attest to. But in her later days, I have never seen my parents more tender and more loving. The stories of their late-night talks together were the stuff that Lifetime movies are made of. So when Mommy passed, part of Dad's heart died with her. And then the call, 2 short months later, to inform him of Matthew's death in Iraq might have taken what was left. It wasn't long before his body would follow, leading us down an all too familiar path. But he led by example and showed us all how to take care of someone that you love. There wasn't a moment during my father's illness that he didn't stop worrying about his children, his grandchildren, his family, and his friends. And with very few worries spent on himself. Maybe his car and generator. I truly hope that we, his children, have made him proud, because as a husband, father, and provider, you could get no better than that man. His death was a journey that we all took with him. We watched him physically and mentally decline, but his emotions and his heart were ever present as he expressed his love for everybody he loved right up to his last moments on earth. Daddy couldn't let go until he knew that we were all going to be okay. And I think he taught us enough in that last week at Hospice House to ensure that. I have a picture by my bed of my mother and father dancing at my wedding. Both of them were vibrant, healthy, smiling. And I had a dream of my mom shortly after she died. And she looked exactly like she did in this picture. She told me she was going to be okay and that I should too. So when I look at this picture and I think about either of them now, I try not to let the faces of cancer invade my memory of them, because it's not the disease that they would want us to remember. It's the life they led before and how they touched our lives in return. And when I start to get a little down, which we all have in the past couple of days, I look back to that picture and how happy they were. So as a favor to us as family and to them, we ask all of you, when you think of them, to honor their memories and do the same. Think back to the dinners with them, the mahjong games, the trips out to eat, the trips to the ice cream parlor, the OPOF breakfasts. Many of you were here in this very room 6 years ago for Mom and Dad's 50th anniversary party. The pictures that we have of them that day are priceless and true representations of their hearts and lives. And their smiles and their love just poured out into this room that day and touched us all. And they would want you all to remember them that way, because that is the way they are now. Together again, happy and unable to lose each other ever again. But now, my dad, give Mommy and Matt kisses for the rest of it.